It's working now.
That's funny.
Alright, I think it works now.
And you're gonna be back in class 12?
117.
I will keep you up. We got other things we gotta do.
Alright. So my question in here, I have Courtney Steinkamp, who's our kindergarten teacher. I did an observation in your classroom on Thursday last week
Yeah.
in your math center times. So one of the things I'll go through his question is, what did you most vividly remember about your lesson or your station work?
During the stations part, they were very excited about what they were doing, so I could tell that it appealed to their interests. But I also remember my high group were playing the game that I think was a little too easy, so then they were getting, that was the war game. And so that's something that I remember, they were being a little more squirrely than I normally would like them to be.
Okay. What did the students accomplish during this lesson that you felt is, and what is what you were hoping them to accomplish? Did they accomplish it?
Yeah, so we've been working a lot on number identification, and then really these last few weeks really understanding if it's more or less the same, comparing the numbers and seeing them be able to apply it in a game independently and know what the correct answer, show that they have this mastered and that they're ready to move on. And then it was interesting when we were working on that with at my table, how then I could even try a little more difficult questioning and that they could get that level. So it just told me their number sense is really developing.
Yeah. So when your career development plan, you have one of the things you want to do is work on the math stations, the literacy stations, on this. And you said part of it would be reflect on student abilities and needs, and that was going to be sent through a reflective journal. So how's that worked out so far?
Yeah. So most times I have a Google Doc that I'm keeping, but most of it's on the spot. For example, how I just told you, yep, they're understanding comparing numbers. I'm ready for the next thing. They're getting that. So maybe we're really going to focus on, okay, so this week we're going to focus on what's one less, which is trickier for them. They understand which one's more or less, but can you tell me the number that is one less and working on that next step? So that's why I like doing the small groups, because I can see every single group and I can know right there, okay, how does my high group need to be challenged? Or if my low group's giving it, then that really tells me okay, let's, I've done it enough, I've exposed it enough. And I think with my plan, what from my reflections that I need to really get going is making sure I'm differentiating it more. So a lot of times I'll be try and explain it once, okay, if you're in this one, grab from this game. If you're in this group, grab from this game. But if I had it more organized, I bought this drawer system. If I try that, I think it'll be easier. It won't make it as obvious of who's playing what game. Just grab from your drawer and do it.
Where did this lesson connect to the Iowa teaching standards?
So for the teaching standard that I was just working on with Crystal was the classroom management.
Sure.
And what I really wanted to work on was my way of getting math stations up and rolling a lot sooner and their independence. And so she came in maybe about a month ago, and we both, she observed and took notes and we met and stuff. And so I can really tell that they can do it independently. They understand to check their station, go to the next thing. They don't need much direction with that. I feel the only direction that they sometimes needed was if the game got to be too easy, then, making sure they're staying on task. But I was happy to see that everyone was engaged, 95% of the time, and that they were independent and they could move from place to place with little direction.
Yeah. And I did observe that there was good, and kids were engaged in all the activities they were doing.
I didn't feel like we wasted as much time. That was my biggest thing, trying to get it more into a routine so we're not wasting so much time just managing behaviors.
How do you feel the lesson went in general, all of it?
In general, I thought it went really well. When I, the mini lesson, whenever I use the smartboard for that, they're very engaged. And I'm noticing when they talk, using that picture for the math talk, their number sense is really developing. How the one student, he was able to point out how there was a pattern, and that's how he found out how many were the same number. Those were things that they couldn't do a month ago. So that's shown to me oh, that's really paying off. Overall, I thought it went well. I thought everyone was engaged. They were hitting the learning targets that I was hoping that they were working on. And
I did feel like the classroom you were doing a good job with classroom management. You were able to get up, walk over to the war station, or the kids were playing war, and just be able to redirect them really quickly, and then you were able to move right back to where you're supposed to be, or right back to the center that you were at. I thought that was good. And just talking to the kids about the different centers that they were in, they knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing. And that's just leading by example. You're showing them exactly what they need they know. What's the most exciting part of the lesson that was for you?
The most exciting part, I like that they were all independently doing their thing, but I think seeing the low group, seeing some things like have them aha moments that they hadn't had yet, or I dug deeper with some more challenging questions and then they still knew them. For me, I was like, oh, that's really exciting. Like, you're really catching on. And then also, like, okay, I think for me, I was like, okay, maybe I need to start looking at regrouping. I was having a hard time figuring out where to do it with the data that we had. So Sue was going to come in and give another math assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of just proved like, oh yeah, that's the right track, because this low group, some of them knew some really higher level thinking questions that, maybe they just get it, or maybe they need to be in a different group.
During the station work that you had, what did you feel was the most effective and which one did you feel was least effective?
I think I like IXL because they're all working on their own level. So the ones that are still working on counting to 5 objects are still working on that, and those that are past that are working on what they need to do, and they're really engaged and motivated by it. So I thought that was very effective. The least effective for this particular round, I think, was the games one. They were just a little squirrely. And previously, when I had played that game like last year, I had them like prove it. So they had like manipulatives, and they had to, okay, I have 5, so they would have to count out 5. Sure. And I think next time I would go back and do it that way to make them prove it. I thought like, oh, they're higher than that, which they were, but it also kept them more engaged. So it was more of an on-task thing.
Yeah, the suggestion I have is probably more upper grades where you just write it down, where the kids would write it down. It probably take them forever to do that. So I don't.
Right. Well, and they like doing that though, and so a lot of times we do have them write it down, or maybe even if I would have just done it on a whiteboard. Yeah.
That's true.
Good idea.
What did you learn about yourself during this experience, during this lesson planning, during the lesson, and then the reflection on afterwards?
I guess the biggest thing that sticks out is that I am constantly reflecting, even in the middle of the teaching. Like, I really thought for that lower group that I was going to be able to do just the shaking the cup and doing it the whole time. I thought that was going to take them a while to catch on to that. But then when they caught on so quickly, I was like, oh wow, you're doing a lot better. And so then I grabbed the whiteboards and had them write the numerals that went with them. And then to see them, so I guess that's what I learned about myself. I guess just pointing out that I'm getting a lot better at even reflecting on the spot and changing right then.
Okay. Kind of on the career development plan a little bit. So we talked about what your goal is increase student engagement and achievement during literacy centers and math stations by differentiating learning opportunities appropriate for each individual child. When we go through it, we'll say start a reflective journal, and that's something that you've started working on with your career development plan, and that includes my class list and also little notes and data collection. So you've been doing that part of it. That's how you kind of change your stations. I understand.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Reflect on student abilities and needs to aid in the center activity planning. So when you're reflecting on student abilities, that's when you're observing them.
A lot of times it's on the spot. I use ESGI, and once a month I always recollect the data on, like, for literacy, letter ID and sound, but also for math. Then, like, once a month I see how high they can count, their number identification, and then we're trying this new math assessment because it's like I feel like we have all of this information for literacy, but I only have a little bit for math. And so when I worked with the math consultant from the AEA, she gave us math assessment to try for kindergartners. So Sue's going to come in and help us do that, kind of like a time thing, because you have to interview each kid.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like, okay.
Yeah.
But so then I'm hoping that piece of data will also help. But yeah, normally it's like once a month, and then anything on the spot that I see.
Okay. So then you have connection to our building goals of 55% of students will achieve in reading, math, and science. The standards you're looking at are to deliver instruction, and you're trying, with the delivery instruction part of it, you're trying to work on, I guess I'll let you talk a little bit about what you're trying to work on as a strategy for your delivery of instruction. How are you?
So what I'm really working on is, I have like a wide range of learners this year, which I do every year, but especially having 3 kids now on IEPs, and then, I have some talented and gifted kids as well, so it's kind of like, how does that all work? And so the biggest thing that I'm working on is trying, with the math stations, they stay way more engaged. It allows them to work at their level. So then my delivery of instruction is like, how do I make sure that I'm differentiating their station? So how am I managing that? How is that making sure that happen? And then also like opening up my classroom so it can be an inclusive classroom, and having the SPED teachers push in. And when we just had another student added for the IEP, so then, and just that other meeting, so then
Yeah.
it was kind of like, okay, so how is this gonna work? So right now, we're still trying to work out, like, how does that look during math time? You know, right now, we have 3 adults at one table, and so then it's like, is it how we wanna do it, or how can we best utilize it by still making sure you're a part of the classroom? Especially when another student's gonna get added goals too, like, you know, just trying to get all that.
I was thinking about
Yeah.
that when you had Lisa and Susan sitting there,
Right,
but I don't know how else, right? I mean, I couldn't give you that, because you had Susan working with her student, and then you had Mrs. Tempest working with her student. that
which
was
worked
new,
well, right, and that it was just
Oh,
our
just
first
one.
week, so
Yeah.
that's why we were trying to work it out, and it works well, and so then we're also thinking, well, maybe most times they do teacher table like every other day, like I do 2 stations and we finish it the next day, well then maybe Lisa takes the other 2, her student and the one who has an associate who's going to get minutes added, maybe, and we're thinking of that, she'll take a teacher table and redo it, so they get the added exposure.
Mhm.
And then sometimes taking other low ones. I don't know, that's what we're trying to work out, and I guess that's the biggest thing that I'm trying, like, I know my student needs, especially the one who really needs to get the goal added, he does best in the classroom for sure, like by his peers, they really
Sure.
push him along. So then it's just hard. So yeah, delivery of instruction, long story short, is just trying to figure out how to make stations more differentiated, and then making sure, like, I feel like I do a good job at my table, and then just making sure when they go somewhere, that it's better. I feel like I have count the room down for differentiated, I have the iPads down for that, with the program that we use, so then it's just like getting a system down for like the games.
Yeah, I think you've done a good job of doing those things. So demonstrating the competency and classroom management part of it. So you're working on the classroom management. When I was in there, I didn't see, like I said, my notes, I said that there wasn't anything I saw that was out of line in there. Kindergarten classroom, you're gonna see kids moving around, scattered
Right.
around, and that was one of the activities the kids are supposed to be moving around.
And I felt like when I capitalized on that, it helped with the classroom management, when I know that they're gonna move. And that's also why I'm really passionate about doing stations, because it's like, we might as well just let them move, and it's like keeping it the fast pace, like, okay, you only have to do it for 10 minutes, that helps cut down on the behavior. But also I think the next step that I wanna do for classroom management is getting more of an organization system, so then when I can differentiate the games more easily. Like, you know, maybe I teach it and then they go into the drawer instead of me trying to explain to each group what they're doing beforehand.
It's good
That's
because
the thing.
some of the questions that I have here, you're answering the questions for me, just looking at them, and that's what I like to see. Your part of your plan is to revamp math stations to include more stations and more choices, and that's what you've been doing, I've seen. Implement a color coding system for independent and purposeful differentiation. Was that?
So I started with the count the room, you saw how it was like
Yeah.
yellow, so I have that system down, but then I kinda wanna use that same system with games, so then maybe, okay, I know that I'm supposed to do yellow, so I find the yellow drawer kind of thing to keep
Mhm.
it more consistent, so I don't have to have 4 games every time, cause you know that middle group, most times those 2 groups are doing the same thing, so
Sure.
I don't always need 3 games, maybe I just need to change the number of dice, but, so I wanna get that color coding system going,
Sure.
but yeah, still a work in progress.
Hold students accountable using Seesaw. How often do you use the Seesaw app?
I use that about once a week, I would
Okay.
say.
Alright. That's the one that you send home to your parents, or you can send home to your parents.
Yep, and we use it mainly with like our STEM challenges, because most times kindergartners like, what is this? Like, you have no idea, and so they can talk about it, or we've been using it more with literacy. And so then the next step would maybe be like, you know, how you had suggested with the war game. Well, maybe they have to make a recording on Seesaw of proving how they knew at least once, you know, just another
Yeah.
component.
So you wanna when you're keeping your reflective journal, the next thing you're talking about is working with your conversation with Crystal and Michelle Cherry. You collaborate with them
Yeah,
at least once a week, or
Right.
once every other week, but I know with Crystal, you're doing a
Yeah.
lot more collaboration time.
yeah.
Okay, and visit other classrooms in the area, schools.
So that's the next thing that I do wanna do, it's just kind of finding the time to do that.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
what's hard. But we reached out to the AA and they gave us some ideas, and Crystal reached out to some of her connections of who does math groups. That was kind of something that was more challenging last year when we visited a classroom, is finding someone who does it in kindergarten, that it's not just like a free-for-all where it's actually like the station set up. But we did find some, so.
So overall in your plan you have so far written and you've done, how do you feel your plan is going at this point through the school year?
I feel like it's going well. I think, like, I definitely got math station started a lot sooner this year, which then I've seen like a lot more growth right away. So I was like, okay, I'm glad I got those started, and we have the system down, so then I feel we're getting into a lot more of the academic stuff, which is good. I think the next step that I really need to get going on would be like the color coding system would just make it more efficient. It's just something that my type A personality will
Yeah.
do, but then the kids really buy into it, and then they know, they take responsibility for themselves, and, oh, I'm doing yellow, or I'm doing green. And then it's the same for each thing, and they don't have to,
Okay. So that's kind of concludes what I have for today with going over your review plan and your lesson. Any questions that you have for me?
I think so.
Well, thank you.